Most places are restricted because they're dangerous. Others are restricted because they're private. But scattered across the world are locations you can't visit for a different reason. Not because they're unstable, not because they're secret by accident, but because access itself would destroy what's inside. These places aren't hidden poorly. They're hidden intentionally. And the reasons behind their closure reveal something unsettling about human nature, about what happens when we encounter something irreplaceable, and how our very presence can become the threat, where the land is closed by design. In the Nevada desert, roads end abruptly. Signs warn you. Gates block access. Airspace closes above you. This is Area 51. Here's the shock. What's forbidden isn't the desert. It's the unknown. From the outside, nothing appears special. Flat land, empty sky. But restriction here isn't about danger. It's about containment. The land looks ordinary, and that's what makes the boundary feel heavier. There's no natural barrier preventing entry, no mountain range, no impassable terrain. Just a line drawn on maps, enforced by authority and consequence. The perimeter is patrolled not because the ground itself is hazardous, but because what happens on that ground must remain unwitnessed. And that reveals something. When humans are told they cannot see something, the restriction itself becomes more compelling than what might actually be hidden. When protection means total isolation, far north, beyond the Arctic Circle, a concrete structure sits inside a mountain. This is the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. Here's what feels unreal. Inside this frozen rock are millions of seeds, stored in case the world needs to start over. Access isn't forbidden because of secrecy, it's forbidden because of importance. Most people will never enter, and that's the entire point. The vault exists in permafrost, in a location chosen for its stability, political neutrality, geological calm, distance from conflict zones and rising seas. The entrance appears modest, almost industrial, but behind those doors lies biological insurance for human civilization. Seeds from nearly every country on Earth rest in temperature-controlled chambers, preserved at -18 degrees Celsius. They represent not just crops we currently grow, but genetic diversity we might need if climate shifts, diseases spread, or conflicts disrupt agriculture. This isn't a museum meant for public viewing. It's a vault meant for future survival, and that distinction between what's meant to be seen and what's meant to endure defines why certain places must remain closed. And then the restriction becomes absolute, where even good intentions cannot justify entry, where visitation is completely banned. In the Indian Ocean, one island appears on maps, but cannot be approached. This is North Sentinel Island. Here's the shock. No visitors are allowed, no exceptions, no explanations offered on site. The restriction isn't political, it's protective. The island is closed, not to hide it from the world, but to keep the world from changing it. The Sentinelese people have lived in isolation for thousands of years. They've rejected contact, violently, consistently. Their message is clear. They want to be left alone. And Indian law now enforces that wish. A 3-mile exclusion zone surrounds the island. Boats cannot approach. Helicopters cannot land. Even rescue attempts are prohibited because any contact, even well-intentioned, risks introducing diseases to which the islanders have no immunity. This is restriction as respect, a recognition that not every culture wants integration, that some communities have chosen isolation, and that choice deserves protection. If you're interested in places where access is restricted, not for mystery, but for preservation, subscribe. This channel explores destinations defined by limits, places where boundaries exist to protect something irreplaceable when history is too fragile to see. In southern France, a cave exists that changed how we understand early humans. This is Lascaux's cave. Here's what feels wrong. You can't enter the real cave anymore. Breath, heat, light. Human presence began damaging the artwork, so the original was sealed, and a replica was built nearby. What's hidden isn't lost, it's protected from us. When Lascaux was discovered in 1940, the paintings inside were over 17,000 years old. Bulls, horses, deer, rendered in ochre and charcoal by Paleolithic artists whose names we'll never know. For 2 decades, visitors were allowed inside. Thousands came. They breathed. They brought humidity. Carbon dioxide levels rose. Algae began growing on the walls. The paintings, unchanged for millennia, started deteriorating within years. So in 1963, the cave was closed. Later, full-scale replicas were constructed. Lascaux ID, Lascaux IV. Perfect reproductions created using modern technology and painstaking archaeological work. Restriction here wasn't about elitism. It was about mathematics. Human presence equals degradation. The only way to preserve the irreplaceable was to make it inaccessible, where the land itself is off limits. In parts of northeastern France, entire zones remain closed. This is Zone Rouge. Here's the shock. Over a century after war ended, the land is still unsafe. Soil, water, metal buried below the surface. Nothing dramatic marks the boundary, just absence. The restriction here isn't enforced by guards. It's enforced by time. World War I transformed this landscape into something inhospitable. Trenches, artillery, chemical weapons. The bombardment was so intense that entire villages were erased. Forests were shredded to stumps. The earth itself became contaminated. After the war ended, some areas were deemed too damaged to reclaim. The soil contained too much arsenic, lead, mercury. Unexploded ordnance still rests beneath the surface. Shells, grenades, gas canisters that could detonate if disturbed. Over a century later, these zones remain closed, not because of active conflict, not because of ongoing danger in the traditional sense, but because the violence was so thorough that the land itself became a casualty. What happened here made the ground itself dangerous, and time alone cannot undo it, when access is limited by belief. In Japan, certain places are restricted quietly. No fences, no warnings, just tradition. At Ai's Grand Shrine, inner areas are closed to the public. Here's what surprises visitors. Nothing dangerous is inside. Nothing secret is hidden. Access is restricted because visibility isn't the goal. Some places aren't meant to be seen, only respected. Ai's Grand Shrine is rebuilt every 20 years. The same design, the same materials, the same process handed down across 1,300 years. It's a practice of renewal, of maintaining continuity through reconstruction. But the innermost shrine, the Naku, is accessible only to priests and members of the imperial family, not because it houses treasures too valuable to risk, not because the structure is fragile, but because sacredness in Shinto belief requires separation. The restriction isn't enforced by security, it's maintained by cultural understanding. Visitors come to the outer grounds. They bow. They observe from a distance, and they accept that some things are not for them to see. Why forbidden places feel unsettling? Most of modern life assumes access is a right. Maps are open. Information is instant. Boundaries feel temporary. Forbidden places challenge that idea. They remind us that not everything should be entered. Not everything improves with attention. Some places survive because they're left alone. Restriction isn't always about control. Sometimes it's about restraint. We live in an era of exposure. Satellites photograph every corner of the planet. Drones fly over restricted zones. Virtual tours let us visit places we'll never physically reach. The idea that something might remain truly inaccessible feels almost obsolete. But these forbidden places persist. They resist that pressure. They demand that we accept limits, not because limits are arbitrary, but because some things genuinely cannot withstand our presence. These places aren't forbidden to tease curiosity. They're forbidden to survive. Hidden seeds, sealed caves, closed islands, silent zones. What's protected isn't danger, it's fragility. Each of these places represents something irreplaceable: a genetic archive, Paleolithic art, uncontacted people, land too damaged to heal, sacred spaces maintained through distance. They exist because someone decided that preservation matters more than access, that some things are worth protecting even if it means most people will never see them. That value doesn't require visibility. If this video changed how you think about restricted places, subscribe.